emotion and melodies.
It says exactly what it has to say in a very straightforward manner.
He wrote wonderful tunes.
It's far more than the one-hit wonder people often take him to be.
He's definitely one of the greatest composers of 20th century.
Khachaturian.
He was the fourth son of a very humble Armenian bookbinder. When Khachaturian was still a young child, they moved into the big city, the big local city was Tiflis, today Tbilisi in Georgia. It was a wonderful melting pot of all sorts of Caucasian cultures. Khachaturian wasn't a purely Armenian composer. He was brought up in Tbilisi, or Tiflis as it was called then, and you have this tremendous drumming which you get from the Georgians of tradition.
The whole neighborhood, when he was a child, was terrified because he spent his time using all possible kitchen equipment, how to say, and he beat the he spent hours producing different rhythms, beating, and he got himself in trouble many times with neighbors and his father as well. It was impossible for him to resist anymore, and he really decided that music is going to be his major in life, and he just took a train and went to Moscow.
He went to the Gnesian Institute first, which was primarily really to teach music teachers, but he went there to study cello, and then he was encouraged to take up composition when he damaged his hand. He'd been lugging lots of boxes of wine, and unfortunately he damaged his hand, and so they said, well, I do composition instead. Fortunately, he was very, very talented and was very soon earmarked as a showcase new generation Soviet composer.
The whole essence of his music is that combination of classical music tradition and folk and oriental music of his region. One of the pieces that I find absolutely fascinating and which is in a way unique in his legacy is Symphony No. 2. That is probably one of the tragic Khachaturian that we don't know. I mean, when we think about Khachaturian, it's all very happy and colorful music, but there is also another Khachaturian. That was the beginning of the war. And of course, as an artist, as a human being, he was going through that terrible time, and he felt that very strongly, which of course resulted in his music. I like a lot all of his solo concertos. They are they perfectly represent the instrument. If you take, for example, the cello concerto Rhapsody, even Rostropovich was saying that that's one of the most virtuoso pieces for cello ever written.
became the official Soviet composer. Meanwhile, he was very much heavily involved in the Composers' Union. First of all, he worked in the Moscow branch. And then he was elected to be the vice chairman of the executive committee. And Hachaturyan actually helps composers feel nurtured and enabled them to actually create some of their very, very great music, which ultimately, ironically, was his downfall.
He was brought up in the 30s, and the 30s, that was a very happy time in Soviet Union. That was the time when people were building a new country, they were building a new society, they were full of optimism. And if you see the music and the poetry that was written, it's incredibly optimistic. People were dreaming about wonderful future. They were planting gardens and you know, making an investment for the future society, which they were convinced was the best in the world. And then, at one point, everything turned in a different direction.
What Hachaturyan had helped do was make the Composers' Union and everything around it autonomous from the government. And because the Composers' Union was so autonomous, somebody up above said, this can't go on, there's a lot of money leaking into these composers, and look at Prokofiev, he's got his lovely new dacha in the country, and he's dressing up like a Westerner instead of like a good Soviet citizen. And so Zhdanov was appointed as Stalin's cultural henchman, and he specifically attacked Shostakovich, Prokofiev and Hachaturyan for being anti-democratic formalists. They'd forgotten their duty to write good music which is going to communicate to a wide audience. They were all stripped of their positions. Shostakovich lost his position as professor at the Moscow Conservatory. Hachaturyan lost his place as vice chairman of the organising committee of the Composers' Union, and he was very, very badly hurt by this.
Я помню, что это была драма, трагедия в доме, и что мой отец находился в крайне тяжелом душевном состоянии. Для него очень важны были человеческие отношения. И поэтому он очень болезненно воспринимал, когда кто-то, так сказать, предавал его. Потому что многие люди, которые перед ним, понимаете, старались, так сказать, все сделать для него, как произошло эти события 1948 года, вдруг сразу резко от него отвернулись.
Есть, наверное, харцец Арамилич, сусеру пара, আমার formalista концерта করছুন, ասաց այո, ես համարում եմ, որ սուսերով պարը դա ֆորմալիստական ստեղծագործություն է։ Ասի ուրեմն Արամելիչ ժողովուրդը սիրում է ձեր ֆորմալիստական երաժշտությունը։
For Hachaturyan, it was incredible personal and creative blow. And he thought always, and he told me so, that these events crippled him, both as a personality and as a composer. It took him all his courage to overcome the frightening consequences of all this denunciation and to start to compose again.
He did recover. And I think the piece that became also symbolic in a way in his life, and that made him come out of this very difficult period, was Spartacus. In that ballet, you could see the link between the struggle of himself that he was going through with the struggle of the main hero.
Hachaturyan was one of the most beloved composers of the last century, and indeed he is still loved whenever he is played.
It has always been a joy for me as a conductor to conduct his music.
Because he loved what he was doing, the sheer sound of it, people respond to it, I think, very instantly.
People go out of the concert and they still sing the melodies that they heard. It doesn't happen very often.
At the end of the day, after being put through the ringer by people like Prokofiev and Shostakovich, sometimes it's nice to go to somebody who is exactly who they are, but they aren't just telling pretty tales. Hachaturyan expresses himself and expresses his sorrow in a way which you really feel is almost cathartic because it's so straightforward. He is one of the most straightforward and honest composers I know.
What makes Hachaturyan different from his colleague composers is his absolutely classical approach, which goes from his teachers, Glier and Meskovsky, and his absolute unique capability of combining Caucasian folk music with European symphonic traditions.
And what piece do you think encapsulates that the best?
I think all of his music does. All of it.